Okay, so to start with, a couple of apologies. First off, for I am a creature of chaos, that I might have to go and do some drinking water things and pouring more water things and waiting for the pitcher to filter water things, because in my infinite wisdom I thought, you know what would be smart is before starting the next stream, where your throat was parched and your voice kept getting funny, just drink before the stream. So I went to go do that and I proceeded to spill like half a liter of water on the ground. So I've cleaned that up because I'm at least that proactive. But as a result, I don't actually have a whole lot of water that I've ingested. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. Secondly, the title is a possibly poor attempt at a meme regarding new phone who dis when people text someone and they either because they have a new phone number, or rather because they have a new sim/phone/contacts list, or because of the meme pretend to not know who the sender is. And that's where I'm going with that. So this is basically focused on the master cabin explicitly as a result of the update, which moved it from the light cabin to the medium cabin category as the title. And as far as the actual content of this, it's going to be talking about the master cabin and working around and what different things you can do to build with it. So to start with, I'm going to grab this stream title. And I am going to yeet it at the other person. Oh, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. We got some recursion going on. The high tier quality content you're looking for. So this is inspired somewhat based off the post by Personal Lawyer 3578, whose name is not actually that. It's Mossy Oak Braylion and has -3 comment karma because people have been downvoting them for being wrong, which is semi-fair because they were wrong, but hopefully I've corrected their erroneous ways for the better. So this is also going to end up being sort of a continuation of the prior build, talking about the master cabin, or at least the placeholder quantum cabin I used in the meantime there, and what you can kind of do as far as fuckery with it by putting stuff sideways. Because this is talking about using a sideways hover build. So yeah, they were looking at having the Astraeus, whatever, attached to the master cabin, as well as the misspelled Averter, which is something I've also thought of doing in the past, and I figured it's something worth doing a video about because obviously I'm not the only person to have this idea, and in this case I seem to be the only person of the two who were aware that that's actually an option. So this is actually incorrect now. Yeah, okay. So they were wanting to connect all of them, but they were confused on how the dots work, so they were just attaching it directly to the cabin, which is not how the master cabin works. So to begin with, this will be really short recap, I guess, of the other streams semi on the topic. I'm just talking about power nodes, so this is going to be significantly shorter because I am assuming people are already somewhat familiar with it. Basically, you've got 3 different types of pips when you turn on AR, augmented reality mode. It's that flashing yellow mode in the upper right hand corner on the help UI. So it's going to show you what pips are available and what type of pips they are. So to begin with, you have your basic pips. You attach anything to anything. Those are just squares. You're going to have your frame pips, and these ones are a little bit more restrictive. So they are only able to connect to, it's probably a bad way of saying it. They're reserved for frames and movement parts. So for instance, for cabins, these circular pips are only able to be attached to frames, though you can still attach other parts to them. So what that is to say is, for instance, I could slap it on the frame there, which is its intended purpose. But you get more difficulties if you try attaching it to something that's not a frame, because these pips mean that it can only be attached to a frame, again with some restrictions. So for instance, if we line this up so it's the same height as the frame level, you can't actually place it on it still, even though it's the right height and those are universal pips on it. The more restrictive pip applies, which is this. Likewise, this is for frames attaching to frames, so you can attach frames to frames all day long. You cannot, however, attach frames to structural parts, even though you can attach structural parts to frames. Likewise, if I pull a frame out, you'll see that that's unconnected. I can still attach a structural part and it still says that it's connected to the frame. But because the frame is not connected to a cabin or another frame, it doesn't actually compile, exist, seem connected, however, whatever terminology you want to use for it. So it won't actually take place in battles, and in fact, well, even in the garage, you see, in fact, if you try and test, it'll say some parts are unwelded and not let you. So the third part, which was introduced with the, I want to say enemy of the enemy update, could be wrong. One of the battle passes in any case, are power nodes, and I'm probably going to get this immediately wrong. I believe it only applies to 2 items currently, the Master Cabin and the Averter module. Could be wrong, might very well apply in the future as well. For what it's worth, interesting little side note here, the prior season had the Machinist Cabin, and its perk applies to any weapon attached to anywhere on its cabin, assuming that you actually, attach it to the weld points and not via other parts, or you don't have it attached to something because there aren't any parts lined up, whatever. My headcanon is that this and the power node perks were meant to be semi-similar in a sense, or rather that the Machinist could have been, or maybe should have been, a power node cabin, because this says literally if you attach a weapon to anywhere on the cabin, it increases its durability, whereas these ones, and thus the bulk of the conversation today, have specific nodes where you need to attach them for their perks to take effect. So Masters is very long, but basically says it will heal parts, and Averters says it offers damage resistance. Likewise, okay, here's the part where I was immediately wrong. There is at least a third part in the new season, the Omamori, which also has power nodes. So the 3 dots, little metallic flat parts, 1 pip by 1 pip. And this does damage resistance, but with a caveat that it resists 50% of damage dealt to the part up to a threshold, which in this case is 360. And then after that threshold is hit, then it takes damage unless enough time, which in this case is 3 seconds, passes for it to basically heal, reduce that threshold for the 360. You also can't attach this to a build that also has the Averter. It's only 1 passive defense module, can be mounted per vehicle, and those are the passive defense modules. Why they do not have their own category outside of special modules, likewise with the other passive modules, the other defense modules, or the weapon booster modules, protective fields, why the barrier IX is considered a weapon in the weapon tab rather than a protective field in the hardware tab, and thus doesn't apply for the weapon turret trial. That was a bad example because I went to trial instead of patches. I don't know. Wait a minute. How are you... Okay, I feel like that didn't used to be a thing. And I question how you would get a destroy or help destroy enemies with an epic turret. And I'm guessing the only way you'd be able to do that is if somebody rams it and takes damage as a result of the ram. In any case, I'm like 99% sure the barrier isn't actually the way you'd go about doing this patch/trial. At least it's not how I did. And I don't even know if it would count for it in general. The one that it is useful for, amongst others, is the block damage, which explicitly says it applies to all protective field modules, which includes the Nova cabin as well. In any case, why that isn't in its own section in hardware and what stuff isn't split up, I don't know. But the important thing is that there are at least 3 power node things, and there might actually be more, but I'm possibly just forgetting. So cool, Bronze. What's the point of this? Where are you getting at? Why are these important? Well, so because you can only connect them, or rather you only get their effects if things are attached to those little circle pips, there's a couple of restrictions, and one of them has basically been the reason why, to my knowledge, the Master Cabin has been terribly unpopular. But hey, maybe as of today we'll be changing that for the better or worse of society. We'll see. Basically, if you don't have something attached to it, it doesn't get the effect. Pretty straightforward. The Master Cabin only has the power nodes on the sides, and thus is extremely restrictive with what kind of builds you can make that actually benefit from heating. And generally, of course, you'd want to slap it on your big beefy parts that are going to take damage. Well, the best example is probably cannons, but you're probably going to find it's extremely hard to use cannons effectively. And in order to do that, you have to attach them sideways on the cabin. Likewise with most other weapons. The Astraeus, I don't know how to pronounce it, however, is very interesting and different. So you shoot with it. Going pew is generally a good strategy in a game about shooting things. Oh, look at that. Amazing, right? But if you hold the trigger and charge it up, you deal more damage, where if you charge all the way and don't let go, boom, you'll see I actually took cabin damage from that. It was 38 deaths because of a couple of reasons, which we'll get to. But I know some people, specifically Sigma920 on the Reddit, will suggest you just using a hyper high health build and attaching these directly to cabin, because attaching weapons to cabins in general is the best way to ensure they don't get stripped, because if a cabin is destroyed, you're dead, but if literally anything else is destroyed and you have your weapon attached to it, you also lose that weapon. So for instance, lose that, boom bam, you lose your weapon. But here's the neat thing. The Astraeus, what a devilish rogue that it is, basically synergizes with the Master perfectly, because if you don't want to attach it directly to the cabin, then you want to attach it to parts that are going to be able to soak damage. So traditionally these have been extremely high durability parts, which will just have a high raw durability value, or ones that have damage pass-through and thus as a result have higher health values than shown. And I mean, could go over the whole health, effective health thing, calculation, damage resistance, blah blah blah. I'm not going to in this video, but suffice to say, in general, the more effective hit points something has, the better it is for tanking. Now, if you use a bumper or a passive melee weapon, which are a type of part that you can unlock, you can see the bumpers up there and there. A passive melee weapon would be something like that, so it has more damage than it has durability generally. But in any case, they tend to have damage pass-through, or rather, parts that have damage pass-through tend to be bumpers of sorts. So screener, shock absorber, for instance, you can see that either of those have 25% damage pass-through. So they have higher effective health. They basically have innate damage reduction, but instead of deleting the shot or eating it like most other things, they will allow the shot to continue through them. So talked about it quite a bit in another Reddit post about the Ermac cabin and how you can throw that in front of the Ermac to reduce the damage the Ermac takes, but still trigger its perk, because the perk is on damage taken, not on amount of damage taken. Basically, you can do a bunch of stuff with damage pass-through, and they were kind of cracked to begin with, and more recent updates have made them even more cracked. But it's very important in this because the bumpers and passive melee weapons do not contribute to cabin health, which means that we generally don't want to use them if we can't afford to. So, for instance, you could slap on Yield Train Plow. You could slap the Astraeus onto it. and we could increase our, better yet, we could just hella increase our fire rate. And you could basically shoot for days without risk of this stream just freeze. No, just the Xbox companion froze. Excellent. And we could basically be shooting for days. Fun fact, if you want to be even more insane, because you get 2 train plows, you could run, whoopsie, 2 parts attached to it like that, and then some even more ridiculously high durability parts in the middle. I'm not going to worry about that, but that's worth shouting out. So this thing deals 50 points of damage per shot. Train plow has 400 durability without any damage pass through. So you get a shit ton of shots with it before it shoots off. I didn't even do the best part on the equipping the Hadron. Observe. I can probably just ignore the adapter as well. So compared to slapping this on our cabin, in the example with it not having any armor and basically losing a bunch of health each time, which is not good for it, you can attach it to hyper durable parts. Maybe. And it's minus 50 each time. It's a lot of shots with the train plow. Cool. So what are our other options? Well, you know what's cooler than being able to shoot 9 times because it has more than 8 times 50 health? What if we shot approximately that many times just because we had damage reduction? So damage pass through again, really cool thing about it, it ignores damage. It basically has an 8 damage resistance. So this bad boy has effective health of 380 because 90% of the damage it takes is yeet. So for instance, if we do that, boom bam, it only takes 5 damage because of its 90% damage resistance. So it's still subtracting the quote-unquote 50, but that 50 is being reduced down to a fifth, and then the rest of the damage is just basically being ignored. So that let us shoot off, what was it, 8 times? And we can go a step further, because not only could we attach multiple, in fact, we could be absolutely insane and attach the train plows and then a couple of the damage pass-through parts, and it'd be a really good time, and you're guaranteed to lose pretty much every other part of your vehicle before your gun shoots the rest of your armor off. But what we're going to do instead, I'm actually going to leave that part. It's going to be important, is run one of, if not the best, effective health parts in the game, the elbow. Yippee. So this is available at the badge exchange if you don't already have it. It's there. It doesn't show up for me because I already have them. So you don't have to buy any packs, you don't have to prestige any factions, which by the way is a lot of EXP that you need if you want to do that. And you can get up to 4 of them. Oh boy. And they have damage pass-through as well. Now, they don't have as much health as our friend, the gun mount, but you can attach more of them in the same amount of space. In fact, they literally each take up 1/2 the space of a gun mount. So you can basically see each of them as half of a gun mount. Isn't that cool? So they have more power score, and they take up more mass if you use both of them, but they also have more durability, because together these things have effective durability of 580. Oh boy. So if you run a single one of these, you basically get 6 shots. Yippee. And if you run 2 of them, well, the math checks out that you get 12 shots. which takes a while, as you can see. In fact, it probably would have been smarter to just attach 2 of them. You would have seen it would have been 6 shots from both at the same time. But hey, math is hard, and you gotta experiment and prove things, because damage reduction in the game is weird. But anyway, that was 12, or it probably was if it's some other alien value. I wasn't keeping track, and I don't know what the answer to that would be. So in any case, we're just going to pretend it is. Alright, cool. So we can run our sweet-ass vehicle like that, and, you know, maybe slap on enough energy for a second one of those bad boys, and now the Hadron cabin basically becomes useless in this case. And oh boy, we now have twice as much damage as when we only had 1. Crazy that, I know. And they each take 12 shots to de-gun ourselves. Amazing. Real neato, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we can go a step further. And this is where the Master cabin comes in. And this is where things get a little silly. But it gets better. It gets even sillier. But to begin with, this thing used to be a light cabin, now it's a heavy cabin. That means it has more mass and it's slower. Whether or not it's actually better or more viable, personal decision. The kind of shit I'm going to be trying to pull with it, we're going to make it a little silly. So, what if we slap this bad boy on? So, remember how I was talking about the power nodes earlier? Yeah, so we attach things to the power nodes. And now we can repair them. So we now have repairable elbows that take 1/10 the damage they would normally take, attached to things that normally deal 50 damage per shot. So you get this. Fuck y'all. So for just making things easier, you get your 6 shots normally with these bad boys. I'm crying because it's so much slower to shoot this way without the Hadron. Hadron definitely not OP or anything. Phenomenal. Okay, so it's still 6 shots. I haven't broken anything yet. That's good news. Okay, and now we can also use the Master's Cabin perk. Yay! So that thing gave us 6 shots as per usual. If I shoot this 3 times, then you would only normally get 3 more shots, as shown earlier. So boom, that's 3. The gun mounts have now taken 15 damage each, and they have 28 health, so they have 13 health remaining. But here's a cool thing about the perk, or the Master Cabin. Its description is a word salad, but basically it means you press the button, that number goes up. Nice. That number hits 50%, or you press the Y button, it stops, and then it drains, and what it's doing is it's repairing things attached to the power node. So what does that mean? That means that we repaired 50% because we let it go for the full charge of the durability of the parts attached. So now they have their 13 health plus another half of their original health of 29. Be rounded, I'm assuming, to 15. Maybe it's only 14. I don't know. In any case, it allows us to shoot more than 3 more times. It should, in theory, let us get the full 6 off, because the extra health at the end will be around here. So you see, I shot 3 more times, they didn't get stripped. Yeah, just shoot 3 more times. It should, again, strip them, because it basically reset their health. Wow, amazing. They got the full 6. And then you can even go crazier, because the cool thing about the Master Cabin is you don't only have to use it once. So you can just keep on keeping on with the buddy. And then when it ends, do again. Although admittedly, I wasn't counting, so I might actually get stripped before then. So let's pretend I was counting, and I know for sure that it's about to strip. And oh boy, fully charged, 50% heal, 10% per second for 5 seconds. Oh boy, I got another 50% durability, I can keep on shooting. You can do that all day. That's really cool. So now we get to the thread of which they may have responded in the meantime. Said things. Let's see. Have they said things? No. Well, maybe they're watching the stream and just looking. And I'm not going to call them out for doing that if so, because it's bad streaming. Wow. Multiple other people have responded in the meantime. I wonder if any of this is relevant to the video here. Let's see. Negate damage, but multiple parts. It disperses them. Gun mount. Yes. Yes, that's true. Dual Astra. 4 elbows. 3 gun mounts. 2. Yeah, lots of... Basically, they're saying lots of points. Okay, cool. So nobody's pointed out what I'm doing, which would be really sad, because that'd make this entire video sort of redundant if somebody already did. Coolio. Maybe not Coolio? I don't know. We're treading new frontier here, as I've taken up 25 minutes of time and not even shown what we're trying to do. Okay, so let's say that hypothetically you were the, if you're, well, according to the people on Reddit, scum of the earth and running a sideways hover build, and you wanted to do something like this. Well, your intuition, if you were somebody like the original poster, might be, well, shucks, the Averter module, which reduces damage. Sorry, that was... Let me back up a sec. Let's say we wanted to make these parts even more durable, and not by adding more damage pass-through parts, because we totally could. Like I said, you could get really silly. You could add... I mean, like, the footprint of these things is, what, 12 pips? You could theoretically add 12 different pips of stuff, and you just get dumb amounts of potential durability. Let's see, here's a good example. Why don't we just make y'all want to cry, huh? Wow, that is annoying. Add a whole bunch of different parts. Those aren't even the best example. That was just an example of 1x1 parts that happened to fit there. I'm not sponsoring them in any way. We're saying that that's the best solution. Wow. The internet sure is buggy this early in the morning. Cool, that doesn't want to attach like that, so I'll just go... Whoop. Then do another one. And slap one of the guns on it. Look at that. Wow, I'm attached to 10 different parts right there. When I shoot the Astraeus, it subtracts 50 damage across all the different parts. The other 5 is from the ones on the elbows. So I can get so many shots off of these 17 durability parts, because they're only taking 1/10 of the damage each time. Oh boy. And then you could replace all those with damage pass through and blah blah blah, like the other person was saying. Yeah, you could get a lot of shots out of it. But let's pretend we didn't want to do that. And you wanted to use the Averter, which is a damage reduction module. Wow, that sure sounds useful when we're already using a damage reduction module alongside something that deals damage to ourselves and something that repairs ourselves. Here's the thing. This thing is only 4 wide, so we cannot, by default, attach them to both sides. Or both Astraeus, rather. We could attach them to one side rather easily. So now those gun mounts take 30% less damage, or whatever the math is, when you combine damage resistances with damage pass-through. And now it will still take the 50 damage, but it will be reduced by the damage pass-through to 5, and then it will be reduced by the Averter to something else. I don't know, let's say 4, maybe? 4 damage per shot. There we go, nice. So, that's cool, but again, if we can only attach to one side, we can only have one defense module, we can only apply it to one, so if we have 2 Astraeus, then we're going to lose one. Which, you know, makes sense. But alas, earlier, Scum of the Earth, according to the comments, we can actually do something sideways. So this is actually going to be sort of where it continues from the other video I did where he was talking about slapping stuff on sideways and tilting them. And myself. Set face. Anyway, so you could theoretically, I cry for everybody who is like, oh, a half-hour video, I can do that, and then we're not even done yet. Ooh. Anyway, Windows Mixed Reality sucks. It crashes stuff. Great. Anyway, so if we slap stuff on the side, wow, we can be attached to multiple nodes at once. So in our case, we don't actually want to do that. We actually want to do something a bit more like that. Oh no. Okay, ignore that. We're not. It would be more like. How would it be like? Okay, I got it. Maybe I don't got it. Maybe that was a blatant lie. Oh, yeah, no, it is really kind of... Okay, well, the important part is it's not applicable here, because we're not actually going to do that, but we're going to do something similar. Basically, we could do that, and then have our different parts there that we could run. I don't know. I don't know what I was going to do here. Anyway, the important part is that basically we can have all the power nodes line up, which I showed there briefly, even though it's not particularly helpful to our case. We can do that. We have the power. And likewise, for a sideways hover, which is what the OP was saying they wanted to do, you can actually do that with the Averter, because lo and behold, the Averter is 4 wide, and our master cabin is 4 wide. Yippee. So, in this case, because I have no idea what I was trying to showcase before, other than literally the nodes lining up, which again isn't particularly relevant to what we're trying to do, because we're not trying to make a tilted build. You know, we're not trying to run this, though we could. If you do something like this, wow, you get damage resistance on your part from the Averter, and you can heal it with the Master. Amazing. But we don't actually want the direct part attached to that. We want the damage pass-through parts attached to that. But we can still do that. We can have the Master cabin heal our parts and still have the other effects apply. So in this case, it's going to look a little different, because, and I think theoretically it should be mentioned, I think it's notable to mention, that if we had a slightly different mesh, this would be possible, having them sideways, because the gun mounts do have a curve built into them. Bad example. Curve built into them. So if you had a connection point there at the very top, then you would be able to attach it to the Averter and the Master cabin sideways like that. Likewise, hypothetically, with the gun mount, obviously you need to move the power node, you wouldn't have it facing the cabin. But you could theoretically do something like that if you had a connection pip on that corner, but we don't, so you can't do that. There's also another gun mount, it's the power slide. It's enormous though. Maybe you could do it with that. No, it doesn't have the inside connection either, and the back side doesn't, and that side doesn't, and that side doesn't. Cool, okay. So we're gonna ignore that comment. But basically, we can attach our parts to the Master cabin. Though, in this case, I will note that you don't actually have all 4 attached, as you can probably see. only the inside two. You can attach that. And then you can do a better job of it because this is a poor example. But you can do something like that. So now we have our weapons attached, staggered on the cabin in a way that I don't like the visuals of, so you'd probably want to play around with that a little bit. But in any case, attached to the elbows, some of the elbows, again not all of them, but some of them are attached to the cabin, which gives them the ability to heal, and then those same parts are attached to by the Averter, which is also, surprise to surprise, 4 wide. So theoretically, you could even like push these in if you really wanted, but that wouldn't make an effective difference. So now, when we shoot, we have our, in fact, I'm going to jump the gun here a little bit to show how we can make her sideways. But I'm just doing it so that it doesn't bop around. Not like I'm actually recommending using the audio port for this. Or, I'd say in general, that's actually a good part overall. Alright, so boom bam, now we have our damage resistance. It's apparently 9 damage, not 4 twice, which is interesting. Oh, actually no, that makes sense, because each side is going to be 50, and then only one of the 2 parts gets the damage reduction. So the math checks out. It's 4, well, half of 4 because it's split between the 2 parts, so it's 2.5 technically, and 2, which would be 4.5, which displays as 9. I don't know if there's any mapping done on the hood. But in any case, I also didn't count. So instead of the 12 shots that we got from having 2 of these bad boys, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Should have just done this with the head running. 11. So theoretically, normally this would be our last shot, but it only is for the 2 parts that aren't connected to the Averter to get the damage resistance. That's 12, and then probably only a couple more shots. 13, 14. But then, of course, because we're like literally the entire point of this is we're using the master cabin, you can get more shots by repairing those. So, yes, OP, whoever you are, whatever your name is, not this guy. Personal lawyer, you can indeed, whoops, make a sideways hover build if you want to be the Scourge of the Earth and run Master Cabin Astraeus. I'm not going to pretend to know how to make a sideways hover build because I don't have any experience doing so. But maybe it looks something like this. I don't know. Probably need more hovers. You got a lot of tonnage left because it's still a medium cabin. And this is with the tonnage heavy covers. If you're using the fast or hovers, then you're out of luck. Although I suppose you could also always run the engine that gives you more tonnage. But I hear Colossus is preferred for the absolutely ridiculous amount of power you get, the lack of max cabin speed mattering, and then the increased durability of all movement parts. But you could theoretically run that, and then say I only need 8 hovers. But maybe you want to be chunky boy, very durable, and then you need, I don't know, a butt ton. I don't know the math of it is. Voila, you can have your... You can tell I don't know how to control these things. Excellent, you can have your sideways hover with dummy amounts of health. So I'm assuming that you can probably just go net positive on this. Let's see. So that was the 5th shot, and this is the 6th. So as long as you have more than, like, you don't get more reload speed or whatnot or whatever. If you get the timing set up so that you don't have these connected parts take any damage from enemies, which is unlikely. You always use the Master Cabin perk as soon as it's available. Seems unlikely. You probably want to wait until it's an opportune moment. And you are always firing the guns. Again, seems unlikely. You could theoretically, I suppose, cycle these infinitely, because you'd be gaining, what did I say, it was like 8 shots of health on them. I'm just going to pretend the Averter is in there because it makes the math easy. So it's 6 shots to strip off the elbows, and you can repair the elbows again if you had them on either side of the cabin and they were split up rather than on this one side where some of them aren't getting Master's perk. As long as you're shooting less than 6 times per full heal, then you're getting, well, more than that many shots worth of healing on the parts. So with it having the Averter and then only having them on one side, that number actually probably goes down. But again, for the sake of it being realistic and all the benefits of having a, sideways hover, this is probably a bit more useful / sustainable. Then of course, if you change any of those, if you shoot less frequently, if you take more damage on these parts, if you boost their reload speed, or rather if you decrease their reload time, is actually, I think, the fusion that they have available. Reloading time, yeah, which I talked about in length in the text post, which I definitely haven't made a video about yet, but also probably need to. In any case, reloading time is better than reloading speed generally. So in any case, you slap those on, maybe you run like Hadron. No, if you don't change the cabin, maybe you don't run the Averter, maybe you run the Omamori, where you instead have the 50% damage resistance, assuming that you can charge it up fully in between uses. Then, yeah, you can pull some pretty crazy stuff in theory. Not, again, my sponsorship is saying the weapon's good or the cabin's good or the Averter's good. Though while I think that that is the case, mostly none of these have been particularly popular in general. I wonder if we can actually test the Omamori, because there weren't a whole lot of builds beforehand, but there might be now. Oh, it's underneath. Okay, cool. So, yeah, you can see the little shield icon filling up. If we don't take damage, but if the parts do take damage, then it blocks half of it until it blows up. Here's a better example. Seems unlikely. That's actually a pretty good one. If I had a melee weapon, I could probably just show it grinding against the cabin and then it maxing out and then the Omamori taking damage, but seems though that is not the case. We'll instead just do this. So now the Omamori starts blocking damage. And then perk is empty. Oh, also I don't have wheels anymore. Oh no. Do I have any melee weapons? No, this not look very good. So I can't get the bot to just hurt me. Shame. Anyway, I'm not going to go into all the math of it, mostly because I don't know it. I'm still working on it for that Ermac calculation thing. But theoretically, if you use the Omamori and are like spacing out the time in between shots for these getting hit, and again, it'd be specifically the gun mount, so you'd also have to refrain from firing. You could potentially get, you know, even more damage resistance, even more shots per time. I don't know. It might be interesting in whatever it's called, raids, because you could probably put out decent damage pretty consistently. At the same time, you're kind of handicapping yourself because the entire point is making these shoot infinitely at the, you know, expense of not being able to bring like any other better weapon. Bots don't care about power score or anything, and Alpha Strike weapons are generally poor in raids just due to enemy count. But yeah, if you like them, theoretically you could do that and then be, you know, to whatever degree your build's durability otherwise from taking damages is immune to having the Astraeus shoot your stuff off. Likewise, you could probably replace the gun mounts, or rather the elbows in this case, with the gun mounts. But probably looking better than that. So that part has more durability, can soak more shots. Likewise, if you take this to the extreme, you can run, you know, multiple gun mounts. So now you have more shots instead of having the, what was it, 8 per strip, it's now 16 by default, and then you can heal the gun mount, and then this also takes the damage resistance of that, so it's probably closer to about 10 shots before anything else. Obviously things start getting larger, and again, like I said, you can go crazy with how many parts you attach to the Astraeus. Not so much with this, you're a little bit more limited. In order for you to benefit multiple parts from it, you'd either have to do the whole like flip build thing I mentioned, or pull some other crazy shenanigans out your butt that I haven't thought of yet. I'm sure there are. That's one of the beautiful things about this game, is there's always more bullshit. Whether you think that's a good thing or not. But nothing is fully known or explored. Okay, what am I trying to do? Trying to do that. Excellent. Good example would probably just be straight using the gun mounts. Although you only have 3, so you can only have it on the one side. Unless you start doing crazy things like having asymmetrical builds. Wow, look at that. You have multiple parts being healed by the cabin now on this tilted build. And then you can slap your Averter module, but a better job than this because the parts don't currently line up. So you'd have to run stuff ugly and upside down, or again, do a better job than me. Yeah, because in this case you only have the... Oh, that leg though. You only have the one side protected, but you could theoretically space stuff out again. Gives us a gap of 2, but we need a gap of 4 to run this sideways. So that might actually be the limiter, again, is being able to use the Averter. Also, I wouldn't want to have a flipped build where it's this tall anyway. Maybe if you ran more of the flat parts like the buggy floors and trunks and buggy corners and whatnot, you'd probably do that. Could also just give up and say, that's fine, I'll just have the one side protected. And then, so this side doesn't get the benefit of the Averter. But I'm not so sure you'd be able to connect the Averter anywhere else, because we only have a space of like 3 high on this side, so it'd be kind of hard to fit the Averter in when it's already too wide. You'd fit it on this side though, because there's 4 pips, so you could actually put it in the middle too. Theoretically. But again, being a tilted build this tall is kind of an atrocious idea. Does probably give us a lot of shots. I'm not going to shoot until we run out though, because it's going to take forever. Just do the math on it. So we got these sides, they've got, I'm going to say 16 shots by default. Right, 8 plus 8, 16, and then we have the 30% damage resistance. Who knows how it stacks? Let's just assume it adds twice, so that's 4. So 20 shots, I can probably manage that. Especially with our good friend, the Hadron. Instead, preferably with something which actually boosts the fire rate. Yeah, so 20 shots, that's a while. I didn't even time how long it is, but probably longer than you're going to be shooting in most matches, especially because you're probably not going to run the Hadron with a single Astraeus, and it would be kind of silly to run the Hadron with 2 Astraeus and then like the Kingline or the Adapter, but you could run the Flywheel, you could run 2 Astraeus, you could run a Kingline and then the Hadron, and then just go pew 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 all the time. Hashtag definitely well balanced. I don't have a Kingmine to show that, but in any case, unless you run the Hadron, it'll be quite a bit longer to shoot the 20 shots, and then again, if you're actually running the Master Cabinet instead, you're going to be able to heal those parts. So, yeah, unless I can think of an example, like, right meow, on how I could get all 4 elbows attached by an Averter, which I don't think I'm going to be able to. That might be the end of that section. Yeah, because you'd ideally want something on the sides, because then you could attach like that. And then it's attached on all 4, but you can't do that where it's centered like this and have it connected to the master, because obviously you can't push this into the other one. And again, even if you could, because the gap's only, 1 wide between the highest and the lowest, on that side. So you'd be getting 3 at most. But I mean, that's also using the side pips I was implying to push them in. You'd be using the frontal pips so that you can also actually overlap it like that. And again, I don't think you'd be able to. Also, again, running tilt builds is a little silly in general. So if we wanted to just have a sideways instead. Yeah, I don't even know how you'd improve on that, because you could slap it like that, so now it's touching the cabin, which is great. But you'd still need to wrap around the sides of the averter and then along the bottom. And if you had the averter vertical instead, then you'd have to have the parts at the top, which again would be difficult. This position has it on 2 of them, and then it also has the cabin connected. So this might be like the best design you're going to be able to get with it. Again, I'm not assuming that I'm going to be the best person to ask about these things. There's probably somebody else who's going to come up with a better idea, but like for the base idea of how it would work, or for the damage resistance before taking into account the Omamori, which is actually T-shaped, it might actually make this a lot easier rather than its restriction of 2x2x4. Because the Omamori is kind of crazy, because it has pips on most of its sides, rather than just the 2 on the sides near the top and then the top itself. You've got some on the front, you've got some on the back, you've got some on the top, you've got some on the bottom, including these nooks. The only place you really don't have them is on the sides, but you have these ones underneath the arm of the T, or whatever you want to call it, which means that anything placed, you know, within this pip sideways anyway would apply. So that could work, plus it's a 50% damage reduction, and it has a threshold of 360 health, and its actual health is 303, so in theory you could run that probably even better with the Master cabin. Again, before I get the Omamori, not really going to be able to test, but I figured it's worthwhile to put the video out tonight for the sake of at least that dude, maybe anybody else who's able to take the concept and run with it. Maybe somebody who already has the Battle Pass levels bought and is going to go be a terror in PvP because I released this video. I don't know. Yeah, okay. So I think that's that idea pretty thoroughly explored. The other idea I did want to talk about in this video, since we're on the topic of running the Master cabin and its ludicrousness with sideways builds anyway, is likewise probably going to make me not a lot of fan with the community at large if this ends up being a pretty popular strategy and people get thrashed. But the Master cabin is now a medium cabin. So what that means is that it can equip a lot heavier stuff, which is obviously pretty cool if you like repairing heavy stuff, because you can't repair heavy stuff if you don't even have it equipped on your build to begin with, right? So here's the thing. There's this real cool new item in the Battle Pass. Probably could have just got all these parts. It would make things a lot easier. Excellent. There's this real cool new part in the Battle Pass that is really heavy and could use a lot of help with restoring health, because it has a lot of health to begin with and it's going to tank a lot. And that's going to be our buddy, the Avalanche. And this thing is massive, and this thing is heavy, and this thing is tanky. In fact, that might actually be the new tankiest weapon in the game. Because we had the Kaiju at 1200-ish. And we have the Mastodons at 1500. And this one is almost 1600. It's also lighter than 2 Mastodons. So that's kind of funny. Less durability overall. Yeah, if you want to be super cracked and if you had the mass limit for it, you could do what I was talking about earlier, run the Sideways Master cabin with 2 Mastodons placed like the elephants. Except they probably actually fit a little bit better. Maybe worse, I don't know the footprint of them because I don't own them. But you could do something like that, slap the Averter underneath, boom bam, you've got, what, 3,000 durability, well, 1,800 durability weapons, and then you could fuse them for resistance to damage, and then you could heal them with the Master cabin. Yeah, so you could do some pretty silly stuff with the Mastodons already. In fact, why don't we take a look and see if anybody's figured that out yet. I kind of doubt it, because again, tilting builds is big. You're basically relying on your team to have somebody to carry you. Like you need, like literally you need a carrier fusion build. Okay. Well, the Mastodon, okay. That makes sense. I started typing MAST and I was going to be like, no, I already have the Mastodon. But we're good. Okay. Oh, it looks like somebody figured it out. Not really. Why are you doing that? Why would you have nothing attached to your power nodes? That is literally ignoring the point of the cabin. Okay, so maybe OP isn't the only person who doesn't know how the cabin works. And that doesn't help either. Okay, cool. Yippee. I'm first discoverer #1 for this idea, at least for as far as Mastodons are concerned. If we try the Avalanche Master, this is a little bit more likely, though it's also extremely possible somebody has come up with the idea and hasn't put it on exhibition specifically so other people don't see, so they don't find out and try and use it against them. Yeah, okay, nobody's had the idea yet, or at least again posted. So if we put a placeholder, what's a good placeholder? This thing is chunky. So it's what, 6 by 8 by 4? I don't have anything that large. Well, obviously I don't have any single thing that large. Do I have multiple things I could stack together to make it? Probably, although it's going to look pretty ugly. Well, let's just do that for the sake of making my life easy. So if we place our very approximately shaped very approximately shaped Avalanche buddy like that, wow, we can heal the definitely single part 1600 durability with the Master cabin. Amazing. But you know what? We can do even better because we can actually attach our old pal, the Averter, to that. So it now has 30% damage reduction by default. And then it also has 30% damage reduction, however those stack together. While it's reloading. Ooh. And then if you fuse it, you could even get more damage reduction. But the one from the Battle Pass starts with mass. I don't imagine there's a whole bunch of people being like, yes, let's buy these for 10,000 coins and then fuse them together and just gamble and see if we get it. But who knows? That, you know, people sometimes have more dollars than cents. But yeah, so there's an idea. You could run a sideways build that uses the Averter and Avalanche and just be an absolute terror, I'm sure. You can likewise make it even harder for them to kill you by raising the Avalanche. Maybe only one tip in this case. I'm just going to go 2 for the sake of showing it. Flip this bad boy sideways. Now you have damage resistance on the cabin. You have damage resistance on your avalanche, buddy. You can heal the avalanche. And you can put some nice parts in front to act as a little bit of armor for our friend, anything we place underneath there. I don't really know what else you'd want to put there, admittedly, but I guess you could theoretically slap your Apollo or just put more armor around the Averter and whatnot. And I imagine, again, if you're actually making a sideways build, you're probably a little bit more familiar with it than I am and going to do a better job. I'm sure I'm making all sorts of mistakes that veteran sideways build players would not, but I am not one, so hashtag can't relate. So, wow, now I have my super beefy sideways cannon, and I can go pow, and then if people shoot me back, I say, no thank you for hurting my big boy. And again, you could use the Omamori underneath, you could fuse things for such ludicrous stuff to make it even worse. In fact, I guess theoretically, if you really wanted to be a menace, you could run like things that are resistant to damage like that, which also give you turning. This doesn't let you strafe as easily if you did run small tracks, but you could run an auger, although I don't see why you'd want to. You see, you get those sweet angled shots cross map. You could also probably find a way to, in fact, I want to be that guy. I'm going to find that way. If you raise it only 1 pip, stop that right now. Raise that only 1 pip, then we can actually attach the auger to the Averter as well. Isn't that neat? So it doesn't actually show it as connecting because, again, these things can only connect to frames, and those are frames and the Averter is not a frame, but its effect does, or at least should, still apply. So if I shoot it with, so let's go crazy, why don't we? If I shoot it with a kaiju with the Averter there, that was a bad example. And I will note that the Falcon perk is active, or was in the last one. I'm just going to make it not active by quickly glancing over and shooting at the auger before it activates. Actually, it's still activated. Oh boy. We're just going to unequip the co-driver. In this case, activate somebody else and then deactivate them. Because I was silly like that. Then we can go and then fire at it. 688 damage. And then if we remove the Averter, yeah, it doesn't have any innate bullet damage. Network quality issue. Yeah, it takes 824. So yeah, it does take more damage if you don't have the Averter, but you could run something like that. You could theoretically also do it with Omnis, although you're obviously a little bit more restricted since they don't like being beside each other. They also don't like being that close to the Avalanche either, the quote-unquote Avalanche. Could do it with small tracks. Rather a small track. Could theoretically do it with not that one. You'd have to push that up at least one again. Maybe run it with the tank track. I mean, it'd be super slow, but gun would be nigh indestructible. Actually, that's a bad idea, because to do that you'd have to shove this up, and then the Averter's no longer at frame level. You could always push it out further so that it can attach to things more easily. Although I feel like that somewhat diminishes the benefit of also having it attached to the cabin, because unless you're pulling some crazy shenanigans, you're not going to also, like your cabin's going to die eventually. People are going to figure out to get around behind it or above it or whatever. So if it's going to take damage, I'd prefer if the cabin also takes less damage. And I just realized I'm an idiot, because this actually doesn't work, because you're not actually connected to the avalanche when you do that. Okay, so never you mind on the connecting to avalanche and cabin and the movement part. Though the option still exists wherever you shove it in enough, where you have it connected to either the cabin like that, so there's none on the bottom frame level that are attaching to this, or you run it and pull everything down again, have the avalanche on top of frame level, and then you could attach it to the item, the wheel, but you wouldn't have it on the cabin. And like I said, out of the two, I think I'd prefer to have it on the cabin. To that end, I suppose there's no point in having it longitudinally or perpendicular sticking out, however you want to call it. You'd probably want to hide it as much as possible. So you might actually find it better to just have the Averter at, or the avalanche at frame level again. Quote unquote avalanche in this case. Have the Averter sticking down underneath. But on the plus side, the avalanche, the actual one, not the one I'm showing up, does have a slant to the front, and while the barrel sticks out, it also does have a row of pips at the bottom, so you could probably put something like a train plow there if you wanted to be absolutely nasty. So maybe pop something like that. That's probably not a good idea. You probably have at least partially overlapping guarding stuff on the bottom. I imagine it probably wouldn't interfere with the tank barrel that way. Maybe run... like that. It wouldn't work out as well since the avalanche's bottom isn't curved, it's flat, so it would maybe be something more like that, and that's if that allows it. Might have to stick it out even further, but in any case you could run something like that. Maybe. I mean, you're looking at spending a ridiculous amount of weight on it at that point, but your, you know, side here and thus the wheels would likely be like nigh indestructible. Slap this in as the avalanche. Oh, yeah, why did it stop? Alright, because the cabin's in the way. Nice. That's fair enough. So you could run something like that. Probably with better weight balance. Have your boom stick. You know, get yield, reload booster. use the Colossus, because of course you don't want your wheels to be stripped after putting all the effort into making sure your guns don't get stripped and your cabin's nigh impossible to hit. I would be interested to know if this were the case, though I doubt we'll get the answer sooner than, like, me having to do it myself. Just because it's so niche. But because there is that row of cutouts on the Avalanche, and the Avalanche is exactly 8 wide, I'm thinking you could probably get away with running a freight train plow underneath of it. Now, you would, if so, have to stick the train plow out, I'm sure. So it would have to be one pip further than that. We're gonna do the absolute worst job of representing that. But I think, in theory, if it does let you have that 1 pip of overlap, you could have the... No, what am I thinking? Sorry, that is a bad example. It was where I wanted it to be. But you could have it like that. Maybe even like that. Or maybe even pushed up like that and guarding it. I don't know. It's going to really depend how the barrel hitbox works. I kind of have doubts. But you could run some crazy stuff like that. With it being basically a cutout here visually, you might even be able to go and push this in a pip. Though at that part we're starting to get pretty unlikely, I think. No, that's fine. None of these parts in there actually work. Oh yeah, that's disgusting. So, whether or not you can actually do that with Avalanche Actual, I don't know. But in theory, this thing has connection pips on the underside of it, or the top side in this case, on that back row closest to the build. And the Avalanche has pips on the bottom, so you could maybe attach a freight train plow upside down right underneath there. And then your freight train plow is also not getting shot off without taking ridiculous amounts of durability damage. Let's see. Because, I mean, you'd either have to lose your gun first or whatnot. So it looks like, I'm just verifying that it's not the, because of the semi-curved nature of this, that it was letting me place it. Yeah, so it looks like that row of pips is straight out, allowing you to place it. So yes, you could probably attach the freight train plow like that directly to the Avalanche. That is going to be disgusting. Has anybody else figured that out yet? Well, people did already the regular train plow. That looks really nice. Also looks like you probably don't have another pip to try and cheat stuff up further, but could be wrong. Looks like everybody likes putting stuff flat in front of it. That doesn't look like there's anything there. It's good to see that most people recognize that not only are pips there, but you should actually probably protect that. I know a lot of times you see a new weapon and people kind of just do silly things with it. Alright, there we go. So that's an example of a freight train plow with it. It looks like they have it actually touching the front of it rather than tucking it underneath like I did. So yeah, you could cheat it closer if you flip it upside down and get a tighter fit. And then you don't have that V in the front of it, which is actually a cutout, so you can see if I aim the tank barrel thing all the way down, you can actually shoot through it. So that V cutout is theoretically a liability, but if you do it upside down, it'll all be flat, potentially a little bit more protected. I suspect we're not going to be seeing... That's filthy. That's pretty much the idea of what I was mentioning, but on a smaller, more seal clubby build, and then with the dead man cabin instead, so for max reload speed. Instead of, just a ludicrous amount of durability. with it. Well, that's disgusting. Again with the freight train plow up front. I suspect we'll see a lot of those because that seems to be a little bit more obvious and easy to do. Who knows if my idea even works. Like I said, it's going to be dependent on me getting the avalanche and trying it, or somebody else, but you know, potentially somebody watching the video seeing it and trying it out beforehand. But I guess because you also have the V's come up more than just that front row of pips, this is actually maybe better for protecting. I don't know. I'm not going to pull out the calculator and the graphing calculator and a formula and try and figure out if the amount of material that's in the upper corners is covering more than what's missing in the bottom middle. And then having it underneath the freight train plow, if you flipped it upside down and underneath, obviously also lifts your build quite a bit, or at least you need to raise it so that it doesn't get tilted. So many people with it. It's honestly surprising because, like, when the Battle Pass level purchase things first came out, it was like a few builds, and now it looks like there's a couple dozen of these cannons just floating around, which is interesting because to me it sounds like, okay, I have 10,000 coins and I'm willing to spend that on, you know, buying it off of somebody else, or, you know, even as high as the 25,000 that the first one sold for. But I have the 10,000 coins, but I'm not going to spend $12 on a battle pass and just earn the item. I'm just going to spend the 10 grand and buy it, even though you're going to unlock the blueprint later on, and if you buy the battle pass, potentially the weapon later on. That's really well defended. That would suck to fight, unless you know, just get around it. But hey, who am I to judge people's monetary decisions? Yeah, so I think at this stage probably safe to assume that either the train plow doesn't work, or the upside down train plow doesn't work, or if it does, it's not a good idea, because we have not seen any of them running that specific upside down orientation of the train plow yet. Sorry, the freight train plow. We've seen many of the others. Oh, that's cool. Okay, well, in any case, I think that concludes the video, you know, the second video, the video of the two videos, me trying to go to bed at a reasonable time, being thwarted by people asking questions and me answering way more in-depth than I have to. So I will add chapters to the video and look at splicing it into one video, or maybe the other way around, at some point in the near future, probably while I procrastinate packing. And then I will also need to do a video on the Ermac cabin and its reloading with damage pass-through, and then I'll probably also want to do another video about, oh my god, they double stack those? Oh, that's insane. Fighting at least 2 avalanche at sub 9 would soak. If they have more on other person as well, I'm sure it would get even worse. There we go, that's the end, finally. Next blueprint is grayed out, and pressing the trigger does nothing. Yeah, anyway, more videos to come, probably. More edits and tools on this to come. I will probably post it on Reddit after I've figured out how to splice and chapter it. If so, hopefully nobody takes my video and posts it on there before then.